Hi, and welcome to our webinar on turbocharging your content strategy. We see the numbers of participants are ticking up, so I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for everyone to get here. Thanks for taking time out of your day, and we're really looking forward to the presentation today. So the plan for today's session is to introduce you to 4 areas of growth in content marketing strategy and how they can be applied to get more performance out of your content investments. And Rebekah has packed a lot of food for thought into this presentation, and it's going to be a really stimulating half hour. I'm really excited to dive into some of these ideas. She's also pulled together a list of her go-to resources for further reading on each of these 4 areas, so that if something sparks your interest, you'll know where to go to broaden your horizons in that area. So Rebekah, before I hand it over to you, I just want to tell all of our participants a little bit more about your background and give you a chance to introduce your special guest. Rebekah specifically requested that we give a shout out to her marmalade cat, Maurice, who may be making a cameo at some point. Hey, Pumpkin. So Rebekah is a prolific contributor to our industry. She's presented at CopyCon, at Brighton SEO, as well as covering SEO news for Search Engine Journal. And she's also made a lot of fans within our team, specifically at Lumar. So we're really grateful and keen to host you today, Rebekah. Rebekah's particular niche in content marketing is a very fascinating and timely one because she loves to work at the junction between content, digital marketing, and sustainability. So that's why corporate social responsibility features a lot in her remarks. And this is a valuable perspective, particularly when we think about resource consciousness and how to apply that mindset to content work. So let's go ahead and kick off with your remarks. I'm eager to share with everyone what you've prepared, and I will be in the Q&A fielding questions.
Fabulous. Okay. Okay, so here we go. How to turbocharge content, efforts for maximum impact. So I don't know if any of you... Okay, so here we go. How to turbocharge content, efforts for maximum impact. So I don't know if any of you in the lovely audience today have seen my talks before, but you'll know that I have a lot to say and I always have very little time to say it in. So I try to get as much in as possible. So a lot of the things I'll talk about will be very top level, but I'm always open to chatting with people. So if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, for example, I'll be happy to talk about it in a lot more detail, and I will also point you to additional resources. So diving straight in with the value of content. So there's loads of different theories out there on how to calculate the actual ROI, for example, of a piece of content you produce. That's really important, but I want to talk about something a little bit different in terms of value here. So why do I personally find content so valuable, and why have I spent pretty much my entire career fighting in Content's Corner? It's essentially that digital marketing targets very specific channels and user journey points. So for example, PPC is great for awareness and visibility building. Social media can be really useful for interest, and some of them overlap, but the one tactic that is at every single journey point in every single channel is content. It's the most necessary part of digital marketing, in my opinion. Other reasons why it's valuable is that it has a massive impact when it comes to ROI, whether it's through generating more purchases, helping with cross-selling or upselling. It's the only way really that we can build relationships with our customers, as whether you're agency side or in-house. And it's a great way of connecting audiences with specific brands. But is the content on your site reaching its full potential? Are there any missed opportunities? So here are some examples of what you might be seeing that you could interpret as being a missed opportunity. So if your website has lots of traffic but no conversions, and that includes assisted conversions, then there's a good chance you're missing something here. If you have very little visibility, so your rankings, you just can't get your rankings up there, your impressions in Google Search Console are really low. You have really high exit rate and bounce rates, which is showing that your audiences aren't engaging with your content in the way you want them to be. If there are any broken user journeys, so if people are coming onto your site and you're getting loads of traffic, but they're not following the pathways that you thought they would to get to a conversion, that's another missed opportunity. As is visitors not finding what they're looking for, the chances are if they can't find it quickly, they'll go to a competitor and buy it. And you know, the internet is a fickle place. So okay, so there's some missed opportunities. And what are the challenges that lead to those missed opportunities? Now, these are all my opinion. I'd love to hear if any of you have different ideas that you find challenging in how you approach it. So the first one I wanted to talk about is changing goalposts. This is whether you're in-house or agency side. If you're constantly being told to target different things and to leave this campaign there and focus on that, or even if you're just being asked to generate report after report after report, you're not going to have that chance to make a tangible difference with content. Content takes so long and it's so valuable, and it's so worthwhile. But if those goalposts are changing and you don't have that input, then it's a huge challenge to try and overcome. As are time restrictions. So I was saying earlier, every year it's taking a lot longer as an industry to create really solid, worthwhile content. And that's a mixture of things. It's that Google's getting smarter, customers want more from you, competitors are getting better at what they're doing as well. And there's just more competitors in general. So the time restrictions can be quite a challenge. Similarly as our budget restrictions, and that's more of your agency side. Algorithm updates. So I've been doing this for 8 years now. And I remember the days when you got maybe one algorithm update a year. Oh, they were glorious days. And it was always like really exciting when they came out, like what's going to happen? But now, in the space of 1 year, we've had the page experience update, the broad core update, the product reviews update, another product review update, the 2020 October spam update, and the helpful content update. Huge challenge because they're coming out so often now that it's really hard to pinpoint which algorithm update is having an impact on your content performance. Lack of audience identification. This one works for both agency and in-house wise. If you're not being given the information you need about your target audience, you can't communicate to them in a way that they want to be spoken to or marketed to. You can't meet them at their pain points. You can't create that content that's going to help them figure out what to buy, when to buy it, who to buy it from, hopefully you. Lack of tracking. So this is my little shout out to GA4. If things aren't set up the way they should be, if you haven't got that visibility, if Google changes something like updating to GA4, that lack of tracking can really hinder your performance metrics. So you might not quite be able to figure out what's going well, what's not going well, but worth further investment, or what's worth just retiring with dignity and leaving it behind. Lack of training as well. This is particularly for, I suppose, if you're a one-person department or you're very new to the industry, or even if you've been in the industry for a long time, but you're not given that training time to keep up with changes, you're not sure how to tackle certain things because you don't have that training ability because of time restrictions, for example. These are all challenges that can create missed opportunities in your content. And finally, no trust. I always want to buy from smaller sites, smaller local sites, but I'm always really hesitant because the internet can be quite a spammy and scammy place. So building those trust signals takes, again, a long time. And without it, you're going to have a lot of missed opportunities. So how can I help? I've put together 4 key areas for content marketing optimization. There were originally a lot more, but I didn't have time, so I've tried to shoehorn them all in where I can. And again, I'm happy to talk after this if anyone wants to. So let's go into search engine optimization. So the first piece of advice I would give to turbocharge your content and to help overcome those missed opportunities and those challenges is to ensure that every piece of content that you create has schema markup that's relevant implemented. Back in my day, I used to have to do it all manually, and I would remember spending about an hour trying to get the code right and then be like, yay, I did it. But nowadays, there's a plugin for it. So it's a really great, easy way to communicate directly to Google without having to change the way you're talking to the audience. Search term research, I will go into this in a little bit more detail later, so I'm not going to focus on it too much right now. Image optimization. So whether you're trying to increase customer experience or you're trying to get some rankings in the image search results, images have an impact on page speed, user experience, and accessibility. So getting those optimized. And I know that this is a content presentation, but at Boom, we believe that content incorporates images and videos as well. So that's why I included that one. Optimized navigation. Arij Abu Ali did a really good talk on this at Brighton recently, where she did a lot of search term research into the kind of words people want to see in the navigation drop-downs. And it was really interesting. If you didn't catch it, I'd recommend grabbing the slides. But thinking about what the customers are looking for at every aspect of your website, including your navigation, would be really helpful there. And submitting to index to give your content a fighting chance. Again, back in my day, I feel like I'm saying that a lot today, but you used to get content indexed and published and showing in the Google search results straight away. I published a post last month, and after 2 weeks, it still hadn't been crawled or indexed. So I then submitted it to Google Search Console, and I'll be doing that straight away for this website in particular, just to make sure it gets out there as quickly as possible, especially if it's a topical piece like a Black Friday piece of content, for example. So really fast. So here's some additional content you can go and check out to help. So 6 types of unhelpful content is written by Claire. Basic guide to website navigation optimization. That's something that we wrote at Boom and I optimized recently. What schema markup by Ahrefs. Unlocking the hidden potential of product listing pages is the talk I mentioned from Arij. And talk fast. Drink coffee, optimize images is quite an old school talk I did. If you aren't very familiar with image optimization, it's like a really great beginner's guide, in my opinion. Okay, the second piece of advice I would give is natural language processing. So this is just a really fancy way of saying that Google goes across the internet and it tries to put together different pieces of information to build a bigger picture of what people are talking about, where it all connects. And a great way to do that is to enrich your content, to provide as many opportunities to rank as possible. And we do that through building in as many entities as possible. So in a very simple way, on the right-hand side here, you can see a tool called Surfer SEO that I use quite a lot. And how it works is you put in the topic you want to talk about, and it crawls all the SERPs and it pulls out different synonyms that are used and that have good search volume, for example, and you can incorporate those into your content. So you're not picking one landing page or one piece of hub content, for example, and only trying to optimize it for 1 or 2 search terms. You're kind of throwing out the old school idea of it has to rank for this term. What you're trying to do here is say, okay, this is what people are talking about when they're looking into this topic. Let's include as much as we can to show our audience that we know what we're talking about, we know what they're looking for, and it helps Google create that better picture and learn a lot more, in my opinion. Specific language is accessible to everybody. So I can't remember the exact grading now, but a lot of tools out there will grade your content on the reading level. And you'd be surprised, a lot of people can't read at like a really high academic level. And so writing content that tries to mirror that sort of high level language is actually quite damaging to your readers, because they either won't understand it or it will bore them because people want to be entertained while they're searching. So making sure that you're using content that everyone can understand and that isn't kind of like highfalutin will be really helpful. Connecting entities for better online synergy. I think I've already mentioned that one a little bit. And taking a human first approach to creating content. So that's the great thing about schema markup from the last slide, and also these synonyms in this Surfer SEO tool, because it really puts the audience front and center, and it kind of puts Google in the back and back and I don't know what the opposite of back and center is, but it puts your users first, which is ultimately what Google wants us to do and is what is pushing us to do, especially with the helpful content update. Telling stories in a natural audience first way. So whatever I'm doing online, I want to be entertained, and most people do. So trying to connect with your audience by telling a story about the products you're trying to sell is going to really help build that relationship through your content. So here's some more stuff to read upon. So you've got how to use relationships to level up your SEO and how to apply semantic SEO to different niches. If you don't know Claire Brain, she is absolutely amazing. She's the queen of NLP, and I highly recommend you following her because I've learned so much from her recently. Storytelling and marketing, the fundamentals, and I also included a video if that's how you like to digest your content. Okay, user journey optimization. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I've included a slightly different sales funnel in this slide than I have in the other one, because I just love how many different versions there are, and how you can kind of really build the sales funnel that's personal to your business. But I digress. So we already talked about website navigation a little bit in terms of the search terms that you use to help people click through. But I want to talk about now optimizing your website with the user in mind, using your navigation. So if you had, for example, a product that brought you a really high ROI, you might be tempted to put that to the top kind of left-hand side of the navigation because that's where someone's likely to click. I recommend instead that you put the most popular products there, and when you structure them, you try to structure them in as natural way as possible, like you would, I guess, in a brick and mortar store. Make your click journeys as short as possible. The more people have to click, the longer it takes, the more chances they are that they're going to get distracted, go off and do something else. And also going back to the whole sustainable marketing thing, every click has a carbon cost. So trying to reduce that as much as possible will really help build your relationship with your users. It will help increase chances of conversions, and it will help the environment a little bit as well. Use a hub and spoke approach. So this kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was just talking about with the sustainable marketing. If you put everything, all the content that surrounds a topic or a category, for example, on the category page itself, then your audiences have everything they need on one page. They can click into it, click back, go down the journey on just one page ultimately, and it just makes things quicker for them. It makes things easier, and that's ultimately what audiences are looking for through content. And create content that covers the entire user journey. So not just looking at the purchase phase, looking at the awareness, looking at the education, looking at the loyalty afterwards, the, now you've got your product, how do you keep it working well? All those kinds of little bits of information that just shows the customer that you're in it for the long haul with them. There's loads of stuff to read upon this. So you've got developing content for the customer journey, content mapping, why the customer journey matters for SEO, how to optimize your content for people and search engines. I'm pointing back to the guide to website navigation optimization piece that we mentioned just before, and 3 ways the customer journey can guide your SEO. I think we're going to be sharing these links as well afterwards, so you don't have to write them down or anything. Corporate social responsibility. I'm going to try really hard not to get too wrapped up in this one. I have a kind of running joke that I've got, my swear jar is my sustainable marketing jar, and every time I mention it, I have to put £1 in. But basically, if the internet were a country, it would be the 7th biggest polluter. So as marketers, we have a really strong responsibility here to make sure that what we're putting out there and the content that we're generating is serving a purpose, and it isn't there just to, put carbon into the atmosphere. So the reason why I'm saying this is because 41% of consumers are looking for environmental information on the brands and the products that they're selling using social media. So it really is within our remit as content writers to focus on that and to be aware of it and to think about it when we're creating our content strategies. If you have a CSR strategy and also sustainability values already in place, it's a really good idea to make sure that these are communicated not just on a standalone page, but on every relevant page on your website. And if you don't have these in place, I did a talk recently on it that you might find interesting. The whole idea of sustainable content marketing is to make sure that everything that you produce is good for, it's showing high value, is good for people and good for the planet. And you'll be surprised at how that generates into good profit as well. Being flexible in your content. So the cost of living crisis is a really good example of this one. People can't make those big budget purchases like they may have done a couple of years ago. So they may be waiting for things like the Black Friday sale, or they may be looking for someone that offers finance options, for example, like the ability to use PayPal so they can use PayPal credit, or the ability to pay over monthly installments. So being really flexible in the way you communicate what's available to your consumers through your content will, again, just really help build those relationships. And Google and other search engines are really pushing for this too. So Google now is allowing businesses to promote their sustainability practices, and they'll show those in the SERPs. And you've got Ecosia, who are, I think they're run by Microsoft, but what they've started to do now is they've started to crawl websites. And if they think that you're a good sustainable brand, they will put this little leaf icon next to your website in the SERPs. And if they don't think you're sustainable, they'll put this little coal mine icon in there. So that in itself will help someone decide whether or not to even click through to your brand in the first place. So, and they're getting this information by looking at your website. There was a really good piece called What I'm Learning About Local Sustainability from renowned marketing experts. I think that was on Moz recently, and I've written a lot about it, so I thought I'd just pop them on here as well. So I've written about how to create that CSR strategy, how to get started with purpose-driven marketing, purpose-driven copywriting, and why it matters to put together a CSR strategy. Thank you. I feel like I went through that really quickly. This is a picture of my cat in case you didn't get a good look earlier. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rebekah. You really delivered. There's so much food for thought in what you shared, and I'm really looking forward to us sharing out the full links to your curated collection of resources, because I think there's been a ton of questions coming through about the specifics of the resources that you recommended.
Oh, brilliant.
So a few questions have come through that I wanted to share with you as we wrap up the session today. Again, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
The first one is about the relationship between content improvements and conversion rate optimization. So focusing on content that already exists and layout and other changes that can be made to improve the transactional value for content that's already performing. Have you some examples from your work of some of the types of content optimization opportunities for CRO that have been most effective?
Yeah, so I did a talk about this a few years ago, which is on SlideShare. But basically what I did was there was a ton of beginner's guides that we had from a client, and they just weren't performing anymore. They were flagged by one of my colleagues who was saying that the rankings had dropped, and when we looked, the conversions had dropped as well. So what I did here was quite a long-winded and, again, time-consuming process, but I went through the first page of all the SERPs, and I pulled out all of the things that were missing from our pages. I then did some research into questions that people are asking using PAA boxes, but you can also use Answer the Public. And I updated all the content with that. But then what I also did was I took away a lot of the sales jargon, and at the bottom of the page, I just put the bestsellers. So it was a bit of a, the clients had to really trust that we knew what we were doing at this point, but we increased conversions by 200%, and that it's not an inconsiderable amount of revenue. It was quite a lot in the end. So yeah, that was quite a nice project.
Another question that's come through has to do with your recommendations in the natural language processing and the Entity SEO research tools. How did you come to include Entity SEO as part of your keyword research process? And can you give some specific examples about how it's improved the content that you write as a result.
Yeah, so I got into it because I think Izzy on Fire was talking about it, and I couldn't figure out what entities were, and it was driving me absolutely crazy. And Claire Brain, who I work with, she taught me everything that I know. And for example, I optimized a piece of content a couple of months ago, and we didn't have any specific search terms in mind. We just used Surf SEO that pulled in loads of ideas from the first page of the SERPs. And we did some, again, people also asked research. And the amount of new search terms that we were ranking on page 1 for really jumped up, and that kind of showed through with the traffic onto the page. So it's kind of moving away, I guess, from sort of like back in the day where people put a lot of stock into specific search terms. I know someone did a talk at MozCon a while ago about how he really wanted to rank for this term SEO agency and got absolutely nothing from it after 2 years of ranking in position 1. And that just kind of shows like that people are just getting a bit like savvier now, that they're searching in a different way, and Google's understanding that intent a lot more. So using as many synonyms as possible, and building those entities and connecting those topics and building that relationship between content pieces, it just helps Google understand it better. They rank it better, and customers respond to it better, in my experience. Does that make sense? It's a very long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense to me. And what I'm thinking of was your first point on the first slide about structured data. To what
Mhm.
extent do you use rich structured data, things like same
Ah,
as and other things, to continue to flush out your entity SEO content strategy?
yeah, I think I use a lot of FAQ. Schema is a really good one. Um, I also love the product schema. I don't do that as much anymore. That's kind of a different team that does that, but we do focus a lot on schema.
So I've got two more questions for you on very different topics. The first
Okay.
one is about the click journey optimization and the really elegant way that you tie in sustainability and energy efficiency to the work of improving the user experience. So you mentioned that every click has a carbon cost. The question is, do you have any tips to how to work with internal teams to tie performance to energy efficiency, and how to get your organization excited about taking a proactive stance towards lowering the environmental impact of content?
Oh, they're really good questions. Can you repeat the first one again? I have a very
Mhm.
short-term memory.
So I think they're one and the same. It's about making that
Yeah.
cultural change. It's about shifting the mindset within your
Mhm.
development teams, within your leadership teams, raising
Yeah.
awareness around the cost of the carbon cost of a click, and then getting folks excited about taking a proactive strategy.
Yeah. The way that I've kind of been approaching it recently is that a lot of the things that you can do to increase the sustainability of a website actually has really good SEO ramifications as well. So making sure that your content is connected with internal links so that there's a really smooth journey from point A to point B. Customers want that anyway because they want things done really quickly. But that lowers the amount of clicks, which lowers the amount of carbon that goes into the air. The servers that we use run off renewable energy, and they try to reduce the amount of bounces. So if you're in America and you want to look at one of my websites, for example, you don't get to choose which servers it travels through. And it could travel through 2, it could travel through 100. You really have no control over that. But by using renewable energy and a server company that tries to reduce those kind of jumps, really helps with that carbon emission too. I've also been looking a lot at sort of research into what customers are looking for. So not only do Gen Z millennials now expect brands to be taking this sort of proactive approach, they will spend more money on the brands that do. So there's loads of different ways you can look at it, and you can get really, really technical with it. So you can look at the colors you use on your website. That has an impact on how much carbon there is. So you kind of have to cut yourself off at some point, which is why I now have my swear jar.
Mhm.
But yeah.
This is so exciting, and I can't wait to dive into the additional resources that you shared on that particular topic. It seems really rich. So the last
So
question I wanted to surface for you today comes from Ramesh. This is about optimizing click-through rate to content. So let's say
Mhm.
you've done some of this stuff to optimize content that you've highlighted, but the issue is that you're not getting enough click-throughs from the SERP. What are some of the techniques that you would use to do so? Is it enough to update metadata like title and description, or is there something else that can be helpful there?
Yeah, I think metadata can be really helpful, but I do know that Google changes it a lot. So I try not to worry too much about that. I think the way I would approach it is, again, there is some structured data or schema markup that you can put in that helps. If you're on Google, I'm not sure if it does it for other search engines, but it will essentially give you the search result, and then it will give you some different places that you can click to, like an About Us page or a specific category page that Google thinks you may be interested in. And not only does that take up more space in the SERP so that you're a bit more competitive, it helps guide users to figure out what the intent is behind that search, because Google still doesn't always know. And if you're still getting a really low click-through rate, I would start to look at the search terms that you're targeting, because if Google is showing your pages for search terms that people aren't interested in terms of the intent behind what they're looking for, there's a bit of a disconnect there, which again is where entity SEO could really help.
That really ties it all together. That's a nice way to wrap up. I want to thank you again, Rebecca, for a fascinating session. There was a lot of engagement in the Q&A, and folks were really stimulated by the ideas that you shared, and looking forward to viewing the recording again, which will be distributed to everyone who registered. And keep an eye out as well for the blog post summary with all of the links to the specific resources that Rebecca has curated for us. And we also have our next webinar already scheduled on the 30th of November. So keep an eye out for that if you'd like to join us for more of these sessions.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a really fun time.